Welcome to Fort Worth 148's podcast, where we meet to discuss Masonic topics and strive to build value in the brotherhood. The opinions and statements of the participants do not represent any positions or stance of any Grand Lodge or Lodge and are solely the viewpoints of the participants. Welcome back to the podcast, brothers. This is Rhit Moore, past master and current secretary of Fort Worth 148.
Grant Gates, current junior warden with 148.
This is Billy Hamilton, senior steward with 148.
And this is Gabriel Jagush, master mason with Fort Worth 148.
Something I forgot to mention that I wanted to work into the podcast is, have you guys listened to that Ex Oriente podcast in the past before?
Not yet. I have not yet.
So
I listened to that one episode.
It's a pretty good podcast. The one where they gave us a shout out, that was totally awesome. Well, the next one they did with Pete Norman at lunch, Pete's a Texas Mason here. I've met him a few times. Great guy. It was such a great podcast. You know, it kind of starts out wishy-washy with the pet peeves, which they're fun to talk about. But, you know, Pete really got deep with it, and it was very enjoyable. So go check that one out.
Cool. Now, You didn't tell me that you went on Phoenix Masonry Live. Can you tell us about that?
Oh, yeah, that was fun. So, Brother Frederick Milliken, who's visited our lodge in the past a few times, reached out. He's kind of doing a series on, successful lodges. So I got to go on there and kind of talk about the history, my history anyways, with 148, the ups, the downs, and more recently the ups.
Cool. Very cool.
Yeah. That was a real treat, though.
He's a really interesting guy.
Yeah, it's no doubt. It really, as easy as it was for us to go video, that's something we got to start thinking about. Whether we do it podcast or start like what used to be back in the old days, a Masonic University or Masonic Institute. I'm sorry. There was like a Masonic Institute of North Texas or something a long time ago.
Well, it sounds like fun.
I think it'd be really fun to record in the library of the temple.
Oh,
well, that would.
I'm telling you,
we could maybe try a guest interview in the library and see how that goes. And
it's perfect because if you get back in the back, the acoustics are good. There's not a lot of noise. It's a great place.
Cool.
It does need to be cleaned up, though. That's what my mom said. And if you watch it, you can see there's all these papers stacked up and all that. But hey, history's there. We just need to go through it.
So I've actually been listening to a couple of episodes of the Masonic Roundtable, and I actually kind of like the fact that they just use Google Hangouts and they use the video feature too.
Mm-hmm.
We might have to start dressing nicer for our podcast because, I know I have a good face for radio. I can tell you that.
Anywho, we got questions today, Gabe?
Yes, we do. I've stolen these from Reddit, so. But they're, like I said, they're not always listener questions. Sometimes they're just discussion questions. Also, in advance, I apologize to listeners if any audio quality is less than it normally is. I am recording, on my end, I'm recording all of this from a cell phone tether because my internet is out. So, anyway, this was posted by the user Iggy Blue on the Freemasonry subreddit. The question is very simple. The title is, would your community notice if your lodge closed? This was a question I saw here just after I received my EA degree. At the time I thought, who knows? Now that I have more knowledge of exactly what our lodge does, I would say that we are the foundation of our community. Not always visible, but so important to its structure. So the question is, would your community notice if your lodge closed?
That's a stinger.
I'm not sure. I don't know that Fort Worth would notice if Fort Worth Lodge closed.
Right. I would love for it to be able to just say unequivocally, yes, right. It would be noticed, but realistically, I don't think so. I think that the impacts of what we do for the community would be felt even if it couldn't be traced directly back to us, right? The scholarships that we give to kids, the work that we do in the community, even our efforts with like the historical society and such like that. I think that would be missed, but it wouldn't necessarily be traced back to the absence of the Masonic Lodge. It would be the end results are missed, not necessarily the cause.
Yeah, I think there's two ways that I view this question. For anyone that does not know, Fort Worth Lodge meets in a very large temple with 3 other blue lodges, possibly 4 in the future, and a chapter, a council, a commandery, a Scottish Rite Valley, a shrine temple, a grotto, basically a bunch of appendant bodies, right? Like, there's a bunch of Masonic stuff happening at the temple. So, first definition, what would happen if would the community notice if my lodge closed? Well, if Fort Worth Lodge closed, the kids from TCU might notice because of the scholarship that we did with their ag program, but that's already kind of set in stone. That will continue. The members of our lodge would join other lodges or find other solutions, or just kind of. But I don't think many of them would fall by the wayside. We've got enough active guys that guys from Fort Worth would find other ways to be active in Masonry if Fort Worth Lodge closed. Now, if the temple closed and the bodies were spread out, then I feel like the community might not notice. Well, they would notice that a lot less activity was happening at the temple, but those bodies would continue, right, in other locations. That's the second scenario. So our efforts would still be felt. We just wouldn't be as visible anymore because of the building. And then the third scenario is, what if all the blue lodges or all the bodies in the temple closed, and everyone shut down? Then I do think that things would be more noticeable there, because there's like the Scottish Rite Valley in Fort Worth in particular, because it is a very large body and it's got a lot of very active guys in it. That would, I think, be noticeable, but maybe only by people in the community that paid a lot more attention than the average Joe and Jane.
And that's what I'm saying. You really compared what? Because if you're talking about an individual lodge,
nobody would notice.
I'd be hard pressed to think of any single lodge. Maybe Holland Lodge has a pool with having such history, but really almost anywhere in the United States, if a single lodge is closed, they might be missed for 6 to 8 months for some normal fundraiser pancake thing they did. Mm-hmm. And then it would just disappear into the ethos.
Well, no, I think it would be different I think it would be different in country lodges, right? Now, this is something that we're dealing with as a city lodge, right? City lodges don't have as much impact on their community because we're just not as noticeable compared to everything else that's going on. Now, I do firmly believe that a country lodge, like let's say Crum Lodge up in Crum, Texas. If Crum Lodge closed, I think people in Crum and the surrounding areas would notice, and they would feel it, because the guys from Crum are very active and they're involved, and country lodges tend to be they're a lot more meaningful in the grand scheme of things when it comes to rural areas. So
yeah, I mean, because you're right when it comes to noticing things. I'm when I get out to my area and there's 25 acres in between each house, you notice any difference if somebody's parking their car different, but I kind of take it in the sense of what would they notice as far as how's it affected them. Would it create any kind of change? But you're in all fairness, the question does say, would they notice? But even if you take it on the grand scale of the Grand Lodge, the charities we do, taking care of widows and orphans, those would be sorely missed, and of course would be completely noticed. But in the grand scheme of the community of Texas, would they notice if Freemasonry folded in Texas? And I think it'd be one of those things you'd see on Facebook and be like, oh, bummer. they'd scroll right past.
Yeah, well, and see, I think masonry as a whole, like if let's say masonry in Texas closed its doors, that I think people would notice. I feel like there's enough of that. There's enough of that mystique.
You know what I'm saying?
But for the layman, how would that affect their and not necessarily their day-to-day, but their overall view of the community? I don't think that they would be like, oh, we lost a good organization there. Or man, that's just a complete bummer that masonry closed. They would notice, don't get me wrong. It would probably be on some news channel anyway.
Well, I think it speaks more to the fact that we have a marketing problem. Like if the community doesn't know what we're doing.
I was going to compare it to like if Apple closed tomorrow. Oh my God, I would my life would be devastated. Well, and it should be vice versa.
I think the difference there, though, is that exclusivity also, right? How much of an impact it has. Like Apple, they're the only Apple in town, right? There's no competition. So you would intensely feel that loss there. But, if you're in a small community that has several lodges, losing one or two, actually losing all but that last one, you may not notice, but you may definitely notice if you lost that last lodge in your community.
Yeah. And here's the thing, Freemasonry is an introspective journey. So if we're doing this right, the observers have to tie our actions back to Freemasonry, and that it had a major part in why we act and do the things we do. And that's a stretch for most people to go that far to realize, and of course we haven't been involved in the community enough to have people realize that. But if it were that case, it's still hard for them to tie it out, because Freemasonry closing its doors tomorrow wouldn't be horrible. But when the next generation didn't have those teachings, it would start affecting the community. And nobody, nobody realizes that in the general community. And that's a marketing problem.
Absolutely.
And
yeah.
How exactly you market, that's the trick.
Yeah. And we take pride in doing what we do to not receive, praise. We're doing it to do a good thing. The unintended effect of that is people don't know what we're doing. We can go do something that takes a whole lot of work for the community, changes the community for the better, whether it's one guy or one lodge doing something, or you're changing the life of one guy who goes on to change the community. It doesn't matter. If they don't know Masonry was involved in that, how are they going to miss it? And I think that's the bigger problem we have.
A perfect example is like our lodge, to where when we first started out, that's where churches went. That's where school was started. That's where you held a funeral. If somebody, it didn't matter who passed away, you could have the funeral at the lodge. We were such an integral part of the community that if they would have closed in 1870, the community would have been to where today we don't have that same pull. They filled that void before all, disability and Social Security and all that kind of thing. They took care of each other, and even it's what created the charities we have now. The Shrine and Scottish Rite and all that. That's before, insurance and all those kind of things. And they filled that void and became an integral part of the community. And that, to me, is how you market it. The trick is, where's that void we have to fill in society nowadays? Because while the hospitals are great and we should keep opening them, that's not a big deal in people's mind anymore like it was 60 years ago. You know what I'm saying? It doesn't have the impact on them like it did.
When there was no burn ward.
Yeah.
Yeah, like it made a huge difference because it was the burn word.
Yeah.
And
it
supplied something for the community that they wouldn't otherwise have had. Today, I think our impact on the community is starting to shift back to an individual level, which is still an important impact, but it's not seen as much. you can't say that you're necessarily turning a man's life around because we're looking to take good men and make them better. But you can sure as heck teach him the importance of charity. And he goes and he helps at the Ronald McDonald House because he learned to support charity in his Masonic degrees. He's not necessarily going to tell everyone he meets at Ronald McDonald House that the reason he's here is because, Masonry told him to do it. Right?
No, I firmly believe that's how it took place. And then you realize you're with a room full of guys that feel the same way, and you pool your efforts. That's why we're not considered a full-blown charity. But we do charitable acts because we realize after studying Freemasonry that a big part of what we do is helping our fellow man. If we want to be better, happier men, that's a huge peg in that puzzle. But to answer that question, I don't think we would be noticed nowadays if we closed.
Yeah, basically,
we're getting better.
Us specifically, probably, maybe not. I think a lot of country lodges would be noticed, but that's kind of the way I look at it. Like Fort Worth Lodge specifically, probably not. So
no, but we need to get back in that. We need to get back in that position of society to where they realize, hey, they play a role in our society being better.
Yeah, and I think with a lot of younger guys becoming more and more interested in Masonry, I think we will see a return to that. It's just it's going to be different than the way we knew it was. So
it is going to be, yeah, absolutely. Because where for years we banked on charity. It's so easy to give to a charity nowadays that are good, worthy causes. I don't think we're going to be able to pull ourselves out on just charity alone. Mm-hmm. So, but yeah, that's another discussion.
A lot of food for thought there.
Yep.
So let's talk about our main episode content today. Our main episode content is learning ritual, and kind of a disclaimer that I want to throw in here. This is how the guys from the Fort Worth Lodge podcast learn ritual. This is not how all Masons learn ritual, or even how you should learn ritual, because I feel like some of this is not necessarily advisable for certain people, right? Like everyone learns differently. So
yep.
Let's talk about different ways of learning. I guess kind of the most basic traditional version is one-on-one learning, right?
Yeah. No, and I think that's square one. There's your cornerstone. You have to lay that foundation with one-on-one learning. Whether you find multiple mentors, which I recommend, or you just latch on with one that you really like, they're going to teach you those tricks they've used to memorize. So that, to me, that's when things started really coming together, as opposed to just trying to memorize it hardcore, start adding in the acronyms and.
You like the acronyms. I'm not a fan of the acronyms.
You will be, buddy. Don't worry. I used to hate them. I thought they were completely pointless.
Well,
wait till you're left blank up there one day.
One-on-one learning is very important. I think we need to identify and talk to guys on how they learn. When I came in, we didn't necessarily talk at all about ritual work. It was like, yeah, you're gonna learn some work. And I was like, okay. Had I known that I was going to have to learn how to verbally learn, that would have been a lot different. My whole life, I've learned by reading and writing. So if it was a class that was based on the lecture of the teacher, I wrote down everything. Mm-hmm. I took detailed notes. If it was a class where you're reading a book and writing a paper, I always excelled. It's so I had to learn how to learn differently to get through my work. It's just I'm not saying I wouldn't have joined if I had known I had to learn all this stuff by ear, but it definitely taught me a new way to learn things. So that one-on-one time was super important because, it was foreign, completely foreign to me.
How much difficulty
and of
would you
course,
say that added on to your learning process?
It added about 3 months. That's the best way I can put that. It added quite a bit of difficulty because I just wanted to, if I could hear it and read it, or hear it and write it down, I would have blazed through it. So, in fact, I had to find new ways to learn things, and it was just something I'd never done in my life because the method of learning I had always worked. Just throughout, it had always worked for me to write it down or read it. That's what had worked my whole life. So it added quite a bit of difficulty. Now, by the time I was done with my entered apprentice, I had learned that method of learning, and degrees were fairly easy. But that was a big hump to get over. Was that?
Yeah, I mean, because when you're as a candidate, when you're learning it, mouth to ear is the only way you can. So legally that is. So it
that
is
important word there, legally.
Yeah, it is tough to just do. I mean, because I was the same way. If I was going to memorize it, I would not only, if I was memorizing something out of a book, I would not only have it read, but I would rewrite it.
Yeah.
And it would help me memorize it even better. But then I'd break it down into the lines, and it's really become apparent how much easier it is now. The Scottish Rite degrees that are all written, it's like, man, this is so much easier.
Yeah, I would definitely say the same applies to the York Rite degrees. The vast majority of each York Rite degree is in plain text, and because of that, it's way easier for me to process.
No, and so as soon as your brain gets over that hump to realize, hey, I've got to do it this way, it's the hard way, but you're better off for it in the end. Your brain's going to be stronger. You're going to be more in tune with how that thing works, and it's going to be ginning. And once you get over that hump, you can start picking it up a lot quicker. Just stop fighting it.
Well, so when my son joined DMLA, he was first presented with, he had to memorize his obligations. And I remember, looking at, a couple of pages of text. He was, at first he looked at it and he's like, how am I going to remember this? And I asked him, hey, what's your favorite song? Tell me the lyrics. Don't sing them. Just tell them to me. I'm like, you do it all the time. So you got to approach it the same way you do that, right?
Yeah.
You memorize stuff by ear all the time. If it's important to you, if it's something you like, if it's something that speaks to you, you'll remember it. You got to find a way to make ritual do the same thing.
No, I think you got a great point in the fact that you have to get your confidence right, because nobody thinks they're a good memorizer if they've never really memorized stuff in the past. I can still remember in school trying to remember the preamble, thinking, who could ever do this? This is such a monumental task. And now I can gobble it up. But it's been through practice, and your brain gets better and better at it. But if you get over that fact, that quit telling yourself, how am I going to do this? And realize you can do it. You can get after it, because anybody can do it.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to hear the excuses, because everybody tells me I have. Now, if you're on some kind of medication or really old and feeble, I'll give you that. But if you're a middle-aged man, you can do it.
Right.
I don't care what you think.
So
I think that's the big one of the biggest parts of it. I'm sure you guys have experienced it when you teach candidates and they're like, oh man, I just can't get it. And it's like, you just got to get over that.
Yeah.
It's not going to be an overnight process. I don't care who you are.
No, it's a long-term venture. And I tell candidates a lot to remember that effectively they're learning a new language. Yes, it's English, but I keep trying to point out to them that they're learning a different method of English that they really haven't experienced before. It's almost Shakespearean in nature.
Yeah.
And a lot of times that makes guys kind of go, oh, okay, and kind of calm down to the fact that it's going to take a while. Because are you technically learning a new language? No. But it also gives that impact of, okay, this is going to take routine practice. And however you get your routine practice in, whether you need to be sitting with the guy one-on-one or do like I did, get with the guy, learn a piece really, really well, and then repeat it in the car while you drive back and forth to work, until you know it like the back of your hand, then go learn more. That's effectively what it took for me.
One of the best things I've ever heard was first learn it until you can get it right, and then learn it until you can't get it wrong.
Man, that's what my dad told me.
I'm still working on that.
Well, and I've always equated it and usually tell candidates when I'm first starting with them, it's just like working out. Nobody wants to go to the gym, especially when you're first starting out. You just don't want to go to the gym. But as you go more and more, it gets easier and easier. And it's not as hard to talk yourself into going. And it's the same thing. It's just you're working on a much more valuable muscle in that it's your brain. And you have to have faith that the more you do it, it's going to get better and better at it, because that's what it does. It's the old use it or lose it.
And it is a muscle, right? The more you use it, definitely the stronger it gets.
Mm-hmm. And, I don't care what frame of mind you think, I'm not a good speller, I'm not a good learner. Get over it, because you are. I don't care who you are. So, if you can't, you probably shouldn't be in our craft.
So one of the most important things about the one-on-one relationship that you have for instruction is the mentorship and relationship between student and instructor. What do you guys think about using round-robin groups for either instruction of the memory work or for learning degrees? Round-robin.
For me, and because I do round-robin a lot now, if you don't know it and are working out a few these or that's, round-robin's tough. If you're just if you're a brand new candidate or the master mason that's learning the degree work, if you're doing it round-robin, you're not learning anything.
Yeah.
Very little. It's not as effective as the one-on-one.
I think round robin is perfect when you have 2 or 3 guys in the memory work that are getting close to being done and ready to turn their proficiency. I think that is a great way to get them ready for the proficiency, because it forces them to deal with an imperfect environment. I can't tell you how many proficiencies I've been in where we started at, we're like, hey, we really want to get dinner after this, so let's go ahead and gavel this lodge open at 5:30. Be out of here by 6:15. Let's go grub, right? And at 5:40, someone walks in. At 5:45, someone walks in. At 5:50, someone comes in, and you get these guys.
And the poor guy is sitting there the entire time, trying not to trip over his tongue because he keeps getting distracted. Yeah,
exactly.
Oh, so kills me inside.
Inputting those distractions into practice, I think really helps, because even on ones that you start at the normal designated time, something's going to happen. He's gonna say a word a little wrong, and someone's going to laugh, or he's going to trip over it, or someone's going to drop his phone, or something's going to happen that's going to throw you off of the mindset of, I'm going to come up here and I'm going to word vomit out all this stuff that I learned because I got it right here in my head right now. And as soon as you knock someone out of that mentality, it throws everything else off. So getting them in a round robin when they're close, I think, is super beneficial. I know we did that a lot for my master degree.
Also, I neglected to mention this, but for any of our listeners that do not know what a round robin is, it is when you get in a circle with a bunch of other brothers and you take turns doing individual lines. So if the worshipful master says something, then the next guy will say the senior warden's line, or I say one of the answers, you say one of the questions, the next guy says one of the questions, the guy after that says one of the answers. It's just going in turns, line by line, person by person, in a circle.
That's how you do your certificate if you get your A, B, or C cert.
I also found out that you can't really do a good round robin without an odd number of people. If you have an even number of people, it's almost never going to work well.
You know how you do it then? Because we run into it at Deer Creek all the time. You give so somebody starts it off, and then the person that answers the question asks the next question.
Mm-hmm.
You give an answer, ask a question. Yep, give an answer, ask a question. So there are tricks to making it work, but you're right in general. If you're going traditionally, like you can only do Q&A that way. It's not as tough, I should say, when you're doing a degree. You just go with the flow. But I wanted to go back to the interruptions. I think that we should, when we do questions and answers now with a candidate in there, we need to put a tiler out. And once it's open and we're doing a proficiency, nobody needs to come in anyway. If we have enough to open, great. And then we put the tiler, he stays out there and doesn't let him soul in. Just go sit down and talk, or sit down and talk with the tiler, whatever.
Yeah, I think that would be a good idea.
Yeah, let's talk to the boys about it. I think that I'll be on board with that.
Well, especially when you're learning to work, right? If you're polishing it, you want those interruptions, right? Because you want everything that could possibly throw you off.
Yeah.
My wife told me stories about when she was a grand officer with Rainbow in Oklahoma, how the girls, they would like tug on each other's pigtails and stuff while they were actually doing their lines to try and distract them.
That's crazy. I love it.
Nice. I'll come do some neck slaps or something.
Well, one of the things that I really enjoyed working with some of our guys, two of these guys are already master masons. The other one is working through his fellow craft. But I work in downtown Fort Worth, and there's not really a great, you don't always have the opportunity to meet in an office. And now my current office environment is, it's cubicle based, right? Like they want to, improve group productivity and group communication. Basically, I don't have any privacy. I'm not a fan of cubicles. It also means that I can't meet candidates in my workplace and close the door. So, one of the things that I've done in the past with great success is you walk around the city and you make sure that you've got a good distance between you and the other pedestrians, and you just do the work, not, at conversational volume, but at very casual, not low breath, but quiet, just enough that you can hear over the hum of the radiators and the buzz of the traffic, just loud enough. And you make sure that you hush up whenever somebody is, closer than 15 yards or whatever, all right? And so we would walk around the gardens downtown, or we'd walk around just the square or whatever, and we'd start when we needed to and stop when we needed to and pick back up when we needed to. But it was a great way for these guys to kind of get, to cut their teeth on proficiency work, because you had people yelling or cars going by or like music playing from various establishments, that kind of thing. Always very fun. So that goes kind of into that distraction mode.
No, I used to work on mine at lunch break as well. Eat at my desk and then go walk the parking lot. Usually, like if it's raining, it had us covered.
Mm-hmm. That's what I'm doing right now with the Select Master's degree for council. So
I still do a lot of work in the car. Gabe, I know you and I have opened and closed lodges in the car.
Yeah.
Because I have a lot of travel time, so that's where I can get that work done.
So I think the car is super important. When we went to the lodge leadership training down in Corpus, it was myself and Chris and Will, and we went through an entire EA degree on the drive there. It was a small portion of the drive, but I mean, it was like the perfect environment.
Yeah, you're closed in. Maybe the NSA is listening, but They're listening all the time.
Yeah,
Other than that, you're good.
Yeah, they got it all already, guys. I mean,
everyone knows we don't have any damn secrets anymore. It's okay.
All right. Some conspiracy theories would say that we're one and the same, right? That.
I'm convinced. I was talking to your dad the other day, Grant, about the what's the name of that Masonic motorcycle club he wants to join?
Probably the Widow's Sons.
No, it's not Widow's Son. Don't get him in trouble.
It's the Son of the Sojourners. Is that right?
National Sojourners.
Maybe it is. National Sojourners.
I think they do some motorcycle stuff, but they're primarily a Masonic veterans group.
So he calls me. We talk about it. He wants to know if it's legit and if he's able to join. I get off the phone with him. I text Brad. Brad Billings says, "Is this legit? You heard anything about it?" He said, "Yeah, there's past national president." Pull up Facebook. First thing on my feed is Masonic National Sojourners, how to join. It was like, oh my gosh. So I tagged your dad and I was like, yeah, they're listening to our conversations, Woody.
I mean, they actually did prove that, though. Facebook, if you have the app installed on your phone, the app is passively collecting audio data. That is a real thing that has been proven.
As long as it's for my benefit, I'm good.
Dangerous. All right. Moving onward.
You know what drives me?
I digress.
I was about to say, what drives me nuts about that? You can't shop for your wife online anymore because she pulls up her Facebook page and it shows her exactly what you were looking at. It's
so
would you like to purchase this? 10% off.
It's great.
So quick note on here. I have Cypher written down on my little checklist.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know nothing
what
about
do
Cypher.
You guys think about learning from the forbidden little blue book? Maybe not for proficiency work, but for degree conferral and degree work. What's y'all's stance on that?
Here's the thing: is that you're going to have to learn it one-on-one at some point in your Masonic career, because you can't pick up that code book and learn the work. You got to have it in your head somewhere, whether you've heard the degree a million times or you actually sat down and learned it. You're not going to be able to figure out what's in there. So you're going to have to learn one-on-one. But for me, as a Master Mason, when they became legal, that was my best friend. I refer to it. I mean, that's what I take with me on my walks at lunch and, work on things that I'd worked on one-on-one, but still didn't have like memorized pat. So I could look at that book, get a word or two, get back on track. And it worked for my schedule. I didn't have to meet up with somebody, to put that polish on it. Now, I would think I'd have it down, go work with my instructor, and I'd still have all kinds of words missing. So you're not going to be able to, first of all, learn it from out of the book, and you're not going to be able to, finish it off with complete polish out of that book.
I mean, personally,
you just can't do it.
Personally, listen, acknowledging Grand Lodge law, right, that entered apprentice, fellow crafts, and Master Masons working on their proficiency are not to have it. Acknowledging that, I think that's a dumb idea. I have no problem if an entered apprentice has a cipher book to learn his EA work on, especially if you're teaching him one-on-one and he's using that to keep himself on track during his maybe 5 to 7 day break before he sees an instructor again. I don't see the issue with it. I understand the opposite stance of it. I can see where it can go wrong. Just like anything else, right? Stuff can be misused, and I understand that Grand Lodge wants to avoid that, and most lodges want to avoid that. But in the grand scheme of things, you're going to have to teach to him first. You're going to have to keep teaching him to make sure he gets it right, because he'll imply words to a cipher that are incorrect, and you're still going to have to do it. And here's the thing: if a cipher is going to exist, then it should be utilized. If we're we're not going to utilize it. We're going to say that it's wrong to have a cipher for one Mason, whether he's an entered apprentice, fellowcraft, or a master Mason. Then we need to just say it's wrong and eliminate it.
Well, and we could certainly discuss that. And I go back and forth because I know when our lodge was struggling, and I was one of the few, it was me or Sam, and even before me, when it was just Sam, that you could learn the work from properly. Otherwise, you just learn what those guys think they might know up to a certain point. You were working all around his schedule, and it didn't mesh up with mine a lot of times to where, the code book for a guy coming through, I could see a lodge in that stance where it could be beneficial. But for us, we're working on getting it together, but we know we at least have a pool of 8 to 10 guys that can teach this. There's no reason that EA should even be considered using it. He has such a resource of guys that can teach it. Now, when you get on the other end and you're just polishing, I think it's a great resource. In a perfect world, I'm with you. I'd probably rather see it gone than in fear of losing that one-on-one interaction. Because to me, code book is kind of first step to, all right, let's write it out. So many jurisdictions have done that, to where you just get a lot of the ritual just written out. And,
anyone can go on Amazon Prime right now and in 2 days have a copy of Duncan's ritual.
Yeah.
And yeah.
And when I first, because that where becomes illegal for EAs to have the code book, it's a grandmaster's decision. So for years, I was going under what's in the law book, which doesn't say it's illegal for EAs or fellowcrafts to have them. And when I found out, I was like, whoa, that's such a resource that they could be using. But our lodge was still struggling having enough guys to teach. And so you're just looking for anything to help you get these guys up to par. And that was a tool as far as I knew, some years ago. But now that we have enough guys to teach, I don't really want them using it, even if they find it on their own, I discourage it. There's so much more to be given from the instructor because the mentor shouldn't be just teaching the words. I was working with a few months ago, and you're going to have to edit that, Gabe.
Yep.
Mark that.
Yep, I know.
So I was working with an EA, and he was having trouble memorizing a part, and I told him, hey, this is what that means when he's saying, you're in darkness and all this kind of stuff. That's what he was like, oh my gosh, that makes so much sense. And he never had trouble with it again. You're not going to get that out of the book.
Yeah.
And that's the tips or tricks you get. So once you get it memorized and you learn the meanings and all that behind it as a EA master or fellowcraft and master, I think you're going to use that code book more wisely and not rob yourself of those moments.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, the moments, the first aha moment, Rhit, I actually have with your dad working on the memory work. And that,
yeah.
Because, if anyone's ever worked with Rhit's dad, Billy, it's hard to actually get through the memory work because at every section, Billy has something to teach you about that. And he's going to make sure he teaches it to you. But, so you may get through, 10 questions in an hour, but you'll know more about those 10 questions than you ever thought you would after that hour.
Oh, and that's another great example of where I've been working in the code book and had an aha moment, and you just want to share it with somebody. I had to pick up the phone and call somebody. I was talking to my cousin. Oh my gosh, I'm learning the fellowcraft lecture, and this just completely done. You can't do that with a book, so that one-on-one interaction to where when something finally clicks with you as a candidate, you can bounce that off your mentor right there, right then. And it just all sinks in and comes together.
I think one of the big things we're seeing here is that learning the story and the meanings is what makes it click, right? Now, obviously, we should be learning the meanings and all that, but it seems like it's a lot easier for it to click with people when they're able to find the narrative element of the degree, right? And I think to a certain extent, I think it's one of the reasons why I've been trying to learn the EA conferral, right? And I've been trying to learn, fellowcraft stuff, and it's not that easy to me, right? But the master's lecture, I do it all the time. I'd like to think I do a good job at senior deacon in there. But it's very narrative, right? If you look at, for anyone who's gone through the 3 degrees,
Are you talking about the lecture?
The lecture and the work in general, right? The master's degree, in comparison to the other 2 degrees, is very narrative. It's a story.
Flows like a story, yeah.
Mm-hmm. The entered apprentice degree is an instruction manual. The fellowcraft degree is a beautiful painting. And the master's degree is a suspense thriller, basically, right?
Yeah.
Or like a cold case drama. But it's very narrative. And that's one of the reasons why the master's degree just really clicked with me when I was learning it. And it's one of the reasons why the Yorkwright degrees have really clicked with me for trying to learn them, because at least with chapter commandery is a whole different beast. There's just a lot of stuff going on in there. I'm really struggling with what I'm trying to learn right now. But with chapter and council, it is a very clean narrative experience where each degree does tell a story, and there are characters in that story. And you still get lessons and morals taught to you, but it is a very personal, it's a very personal experience, and it is also person-oriented, because you see characters and they have conflicts and there is drama, but it plays out like a real-life sort of situation. And so I think that's kind of what makes it click for me, especially like the Royal Arch degree, which is intensely sort of narrative.
Yeah. No, for the EA, I had to make a little acronym for the lecture, because I wouldn't know what would come next. It just doesn't flow. You're right. It's just like instruction manual. Okay, next. So I have like a little acronym that gets me to the next set of instructions. In the masters, I don't have that. It just flows like a champ.
Yeah. Well, and so for the entered apprentice lecture, one of the big things that really helped me was learning things out of order, right? You have to be able to do the lecture backwards and forwards and stuff. And when I say that, I don't mean it so well that you can do it backwards and forwards, but literally just say, okay, I'm going to give each paragraph backwards, right? And you just work backwards through the degree, because it's not narrative, right? It's just kind of these little, yes, we talk about, the first section of the degree and we explain what happens in it, but the rest of it is just kind of like, okay, all of this is not as tied in together. We have to kind of go backwards.
No, I swear I did. Once I got comfortable saying it, and it kind of flowed out, I was like, all right, now let's try this backwards, because you always start at the beginning and don't always make it to the end. So the end doesn't get the same amount of practice.
Yeah.
So it's good to start backwards.
Yeah. I guess in that same line, you have to have a conceptual skeleton of the degree.
Yes.
Because one way, if you get hung up on the little details, like obviously you want to learn the little details, otherwise you're not giving a full lecture. But one of the big things I think is if you're doing a lecture or if you are doing a degree conferral, whether you're the conferring officer or you're one of the subordinate officers, you have to have enough of a conceptual skeleton of the thing where you say, okay, well, this happens here, and I give him the apron here, or whatever, right? Or, anything. You be able to describe it all in plain English. And after that, you can kind of hang detailed paragraphs off of the conceptual skeleton. For any programmers out there, you basically want to be able to rubber duck the degree, right? And rubber ducking is when you have your long lines of code and you put a little rubber duck on your desk and you go line by line through the code of the program and you explain to the rubber duck what each line of code does, right? So you should be able to rubber duck a degree. You explain to this little rubber duck what each line of the conferral or each line of the lecture is in plain English. So there's a little bit of a translation issue there, I think.
No, and I think again, you can't let your confidence get in your way when you're learning this stuff, because it doesn't happen overnight. You're never going to feel like you're ready to give the lecture. I still remember my first EA. I was ready to give the lecture, and we'd probably done 7 or 8 EA degrees, but I just sat quietly and didn't tell anybody. My mentor didn't push it on me, to where one night they had one scheduled and Sam didn't show up and they were canceling the degree. I was like, I can do it.
This.
And man, you talk about nervous. And I goofed it all kinds of up, but the candidate didn't really know.
Yeah.
But it broke the seal, and I pretty much have done almost every lecture up until you came around. Because
hijacking
once
your job,
Sam realized what was going on, he was like, yeah, you tear it up.
I think the last last couple of times that you've done a lecture was because I had forgotten the Fellowcraft lecture, and then for the other one I was out of town. But
no, and I enjoy. I want you to get your practice in, but I will always work in lectures from time to time. Got to stay fresh.
I think one of the things that I'm cluing into there, right, is that you were so nervous, right, until you actually went and did it, and you were still nervous after that. But the big thing was taking that giant leap of faith, right? And there's a big element of, I look at it 2 ways. There's that element of taking the leap of faith, right? You have to. The whole concept of faith is you don't take the leap of faith because you believe. You take the leap of faith and then you believe because of the leap. And then there's also the wonderful concept of fake it until you make it, right?
Yeah.
And so for the first couple times around, you really got to fake it. So.
No, absolutely.
You got to be confident,
You could do a few practice runs in front of a few bros, work through your nerves, but you're never going to get. There's no feeling like doing it in front of a candidate, and that's his night. You want to be as ready as you possibly can be, but
absolutely,
like I said, you're never going to go, yep, I'm ready.
No, sir.
Very, very rarely.
Even when you think you're ready, that's when your mind's going to blank. The first time I had to do a charge, right? I went over it. I had it perfect. I could do it over and over and over again at home perfectly. And I get there, and about halfway through, I'm like, I got this. And then that's when my mind went blank.
Dude. I did that at my grandfather's funeral.
Oh, jeez.
I was 2 sentences in. The part I had down like Judy Brown. That first paragraph I knew in my sleep and immediately forgot. Well, of course, I had my cousin right there to prompt me. He was reading along. He gave me one word. I didn't miss a beat the rest of the time.
Wow.
And it's just weird how that happens. I knew it. But still, I just like the gears jammed up. I just went blank.
Well, it's also a really high stress environment too. Like you're at a funeral.
That's what gets you, because then you start realizing, I'm embarrassing myself. I've got a lot, that pressure just shuts that old brain down.
Well, and honestly, the key, I think, is just to grind at it, right? You have to do this so much. You have to do this so much until it's just another degree, right? And every degree is special. Don't get me wrong. And you have to be able to enjoy it as being an individual, unique degree every time. But confidence-wise, in order to get the parts down, confidence-wise, it just has to be another degree. And you've done so many of these that you've forgotten how many you've been to, and that's okay. And then you just let everything go on autopilot. But getting to the autopilot is so difficult.
Yeah, well, there's just so many variables that come into play. Autopilot's a great example, because as a pilot, there's just so many things that can happen, because if your senior warden starts going bohemian in a degree, it's hard for that not to get everybody off track. It's contagious. I swear it is. And until you learn how to navigate those moments and get things back on track, you can't until you experience them.
And you might be really good at something and still mess it up all the time. You know?
Oh, if somebody else is messing up, it's hard not to.
I'm wondering what exactly you mean by bohemian, Rhit, because I'm picturing them like just taking off all their clothes and saying, screw it.
Just have a bottle of absinthe and they're waving a check flag. And
so that was the Sam Levacy term. We had a past master that just, could give it back to you in a one-on-one setting, and he would get up there in the East and just, it's like, where is he even coming up with these words? He would just go off, where it would kind of make sense and get done what was supposed to get done, but it was completely different words. And Sam would say, "Oh, it's getting bohemian again."
It's so odd. I love it.
Yeah, and so it's kind of stuck.
I think one of the big keys, right? We all know that somewhere along the way we are going to mess up, right? And especially if we've been really busy and we've been doing a million things at once, I still, turn to Rhit very often. I go, watch me screw this degree up, or lecture, and I usually get that very well, and it's a different thing every time. Like every degree lecture I do, something will happen where like my brain just jumps off the rails and I go, I don't know what I'm saying anymore. What's going on here? And one of the keys that I've found this works for me. It may not work for anyone, but you have to be so familiar with the work and you have to have heard the degree enough times that you acquire the verbal pattern of the degree and the conceptual ideas that are presented in the degree, and then you just like keep talking in that vocal pattern and using that verbiage, and it'll kind of fit in, and you just go until you remember or until you get back on track, right?
Yes.
So you have to be really intensely familiar with the degrees because you gotta be able to bullshit just enough that you can figure it out.
No, you're right, because that's kind of going bohemian, but keeping the boat in the right direction. And
for guys working on their proficiency work, I think we need to make it clear to them that we understand you're not going to turn a perfect proficiency every time, even if you know it perfectly. Something's going to go wrong, right? and guys need to understand that we're not gonna boo you out of lodge and kick you in the rear and tell you never come back.
Oh, that's not what we do.
That's not what we do.
Oh,
but
I had no idea.
No, it's not what we do. I think the worst screw up I ever made in a degree, and I swear it's something I've done a million times. Right, I've done the junior warden part in an apprentice degree a million times. At least that's what it feels like. Not a million, but I've done it a lot. And we got up there, and I gave the sign upside down in a degree. And I was pretty embarrassed about that. I knew exactly when it happened. I mean, I had to turn bright red, but it happens sometimes. Your mind's somewhere else, or you're just tired and you screw something up.
Yeah,
don't worry about it.
Here's the because before I learned lectures, Sam Levacy had never ever messed up a lecture, as far as I knew. Mm-hmm. So after you learn the work and you realize that these experts that know the work inside and out still miss stuff, sometimes Sam would miss a whole explanation. And it's like, hey, wait a minute.
It's just confidence.
Oh, yeah. And he'd just click right on like, baby, and he might even come back and work it in if it was appropriate,
I've done that before.
But once you realize those mentors are fallible as well, it takes a lot of the pressure off.
Being able to be flexible enough to go back and work it in somehow, that's real. That's when when you can pull that off and it doesn't look weird, that's when I got this. I was able to do that for I had an apron presentation once where I had to go back and work something in, and then I had a it was like I want to say it was like York Wright council summary or something like that. And that's a summary of every degree from the entered apprentice to the select master degree in council. So you're covering like 9 degrees.
No, I've had to do that on the
I had to go back and rewind. But
or not master's lecture, but the obligation.
Do any
I always get those mixed up.
Do any of y'all use the memory palace technique? I've also heard it called the method of loci. Does anyone here do that?
Okay. So I'm kind of familiar with it, and that's kind of like where you create a story, right, that you walk through, and it helps trigger different portions of what you want to bring up.
Yeah, like you create a memory palace, but like basically you build a house, and each house there's rooms in each house, and you have things in each room that are tied to certain memories. I mean, I don't really use that, but I was wondering if any of y'all did.
Well, I did a lot of research on it because when I started getting into hearing about acronyms and things, I started looking into memory and how it works, how to, do it better. And that really clicked with me, although I didn't like the idea of building a room. Like some people number the rooms and then you put stuff in the room. I just associate things to it, like the duly and truly prepared. For some reason, a duly pickup, when I tied that to that part, I never left out the duly anymore. And I use a lot of the words. What is it? PRC for the senior deacon spot?
Yep. I use People's Republic of China.
Yeah. And those kind of things help keep you in order. Like I used to always get uprightness of conduct and purity of heart flipped. And until I went, PU, it stinks. I'm getting it wrong all the time. I never get it backwards anymore. So that's kind of the same thing, but it's just, I guess, more memory by association, because if you're not doing that, you're really making it harder on yourself than you should. And it can be a silly and stupid. I mean, because like the writing, the EA obligation, I turned that into a James Brown song.
God,
and I've got
sir.
the hooves and all that in there, and it just synced with me, and I got it stuck.
When I did the EA obligation, I would sit there and count, and for some reason, everything for me in there, it made sense if I broke it down into 13 words. So when I was learning it, I was driving, I would sit there and I would count and sign to 13, and that would trigger me to the next part. It was really, really strange, but for some reason that worked. So, whatever works for
I tried numbers. Numbers didn't work for
me. There's some stuff like, the unfortunate reality is that a lot of your memorization is going to end up being brute force rote memorization, right? Where you just read the line over and over and over again, right? And Grant, kind of what you're talking about, where you would count off in 13 words or whatever, and then and you'd have the next chain. One of the big things I've found is, so for digesting stuff really quickly and being able to just rote memorize it, I will read a line, for this, especially for York Wright stuff, right? This doesn't work as well for Blue Lodge because it's all ciphered, but, I've got the aid to memory and I use it a lot, so this also for Blue Lodge, it's ciphered. But so I'll read it from the page twice. And then I'll put the book down and I'll take a stab at it mentally, without referring to it once. And then I read it again, and then I take a stab at it again. And I keep doing that last one until I can do it times. But so usually it'll just be 5 times. Read it twice, recite it once, read it again, recite it once. And if it just takes 5 tries and to get a short clause. Right. And then I go on to the next clause and I have to try and chain those 2 clauses together. Yeah. So the big thing for me is being able to chain the last clause or phrase in a paragraph to the first clause of the next paragraph. And that's the most important part. So, because if you learn it paragraph by paragraph, you can skip a whole paragraph and miss it, you know?
Yeah.
But, you know, I try and learn it kind of almost in the middle of each paragraph first so that I can avoid trying to chain the beginning and end of paragraphs together.
Well, and I'll read those two sentences, the last and the first, like you do a whole bunch of times, and then say them a whole bunch from memory over and over. So you get that rhythmic flow to where if that next word from the first sentence doesn't come, your brain goes, wait, this isn't right. You know, when you're doing it just straight from memory up there. Because I'm with you. When you transition from one to the next, if there's not that connector, you could jump to any paragraph.
Yeah. And here I have 3 bullet points that I have on my notes that I wanted to kind of chain together here. Oh, speaking of chaining things together. I have muscle memory and kinesthetics, being in the room, and tactics, right? Or footwork. You know, tactics is really tough when you are studying on your own. One of the big things, you know, you have to be able, if you're on your own and you're sitting on your couch or something, you have to be verbally walking through tactics, right? And you have to be able to describe, you have to be familiar enough with your room, your lodge room, that you can close your eyes and verbally describe where you are in the room and what you're doing. That's a big point because there's a, you know, we have this thing called, in New York, right? We have this thing called the School of Instruction, right? And this is very similar to the forum and exam that you see in Blue Lodge. In Blue Lodge, we have, before all the certifications, there's the forum, and it is usually a master's degree, sometimes all 3. I've been to one where it was all 3. But they demonstrate it by the committee on work or by guys that are signed off on by the committee on work as basically being perfect at the work. And this includes the footwork or tactics. And that's really important because you can get the verbal parts right all day long. But the tactics is something you really don't see until you see it in person. So part of at least degree conferral, the lectures are different, although I do actually incorporate hand motions and stuff into my memory work when I'm doing lectures. You got to be able to know where you are, and you got to have that muscle memory built in. The muscle memory will trigger words. That's important, you know. But being in the room also, you have to be in your room practicing regularly in the lodge room as well, I think.
No, getting used to the environment. It's not a bad point.
The Royal Arch degree, and the Royal Arch degree especially, is very difficult for this. Obviously, the master's degree, there's a lot of moving around and all that, but the Royal Arch degree is based off of 7 circumambulations, and you're on a long journey from one country to another in the degree, and you have to be able to figure out, the senior deacon has a whole lecture that he gives basically throughout the entirety degree. I would say the principal sojourner, that's the part that I'm talking about. The principal sojourner is about as long as the master's degree. That's a part within the Royal Arch degree. And so you have to be able to tie in where you physically are in the room during each circumambulation in order to get the verbal parts right. It's a total nightmare, but you have to be able to practice in the room, or at least be able to close your eyes and visualize yourself walking through the room.
No, because I mean, especially when you're learning the degree work too, like conferring, you know, there's that part where I call scratching your head and rubbing your belly when you're walking up to the candidate, giving instruction. You got to practice that.
Yes.
In no better place than the lodge room to do it. And when I'm teaching as well, that's a huge tactic. You know, okay, you just left the door. Now what happened? And have them actually point. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Walk them through the room. And that's where stuff like the walking lectures originated, you know, which cough, cough, cough. Nobody does those. Cough, cough, cough. You know, I won't say anything if anybody does. But walking lectures originated from that practice of like physically showing candidates what was going on.
Yeah, and I mean, you hit the nail on the head when you said it's mostly just brute force, but there comes, like when you smell something and it triggers a memory, or when you feel something and it triggers a memory, you see triggers, you start adding all those into your memorization of the ritual work. It becomes easier and easier to recall that stuff. So you got to play on all of those senses, and that's why there used to be incense. That was part of it. It would mark that occasion as something special. It had its own scent. It was an assault on the senses. But that's what memorizing should be. And that's why I love associating things with it. The more ways, and I kind of equate it, the more back roads you give your brain, more synapse it can go different directions to connect you to that memory you're looking for, the quicker and easier it's going to be to get to it.
Yep. And
doesn't matter if it's a James Brown song like me, just pick what clicks with you.
And as with all things that are difficult to do, brute force rote memorization is best done in small chunks over a longer period of time. So that, take it easy. You have time. There are other people that can do those conferrals. Relax. Take your time. Learn it slowly. However, what happens if somebody says, we have to do this, we don't have anyone that can do this, can you learn this really quick? And let's say it's a bigger part. Gentlemen, what would your strategy be?
Push yourself.
Yeah. Let's say you have a day or maybe less to learn a crazy part really fast. What's up? How do you do this?
You cram.
Yeah, you cram.
Right.
Personally, I'd try to shift it off to Gabe. Be like, listen, I don't have time for this. But Gabe has time.
He's the guy.
Hey, no, I started a new job. I don't have time for anything.
No, Gabe totally has time for everything, man. Y'all give Gabe a call. It better be in a cipher book for me.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it's probably not going to happen.
Yeah. If it's not, you're going to have to sit down with somebody. But when my first grandfather passed away, my dad's dad, I did his funeral as well, and I had 6 days to learn the funeral. So it wasn't like it was overnight, but I locked myself in the garage. I went out to the garage. It's all in writing in the monitor, and 6-7 hours straight until I could say it from start to finish, and then just quit. And would say it in the car or whatever, came back. It's the same thing next day, 6 to 7 hours in the garage. And I was pretty comfortable with it after that amount of time. And then just said it to my wife about 4 times while she read along. And she'd pick stuff out. So it's totally possible because, I'm telling you, I was that guy. That I'm no good at memorizing. I can't spell good. The confidence this memory work has given me has changed that. I don't believe that anymore. I just think I'm lazy. That's what I'm fighting now, is that demon. And that's another thing you got to come to terms with, is that it's not like you're going to be like, yippee, I'm going to go work on memory work every time.
Oh, sometimes it's like, oh God, I have to work on memory work.
It is, especially, I struggle with it more than I ever have now because, I'll say it in the car and it's like, yeah, I got that. I'm good. I got it. But you have to continue and persevere. Not only for the memorization, but still when I'm working on it, I'll have that aha moment and it'll shut down the work on the memory work and I'll be Googling something.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what it's all about.
Mm-hmm. Billy, what about you?
So if you have a super large part and you have like no time to memorize it, I think honestly, in a case like that, I don't think anyone's going to expect you to have it absolutely perfect when it comes time to do it. And you're going to have some brothers there that are going to help you. With that being said, though, you want to push yourself, and yeah, you're going to have to cram like you've never crammed before. You know,
you weren't around.
There's
for
been
me
times I've shown. Well, there have been times when I've shown up and it's like, hey, can you do this part? Here's the lines. Go. You know.
Yeah.
So.
That's never happened to anybody else.
Yeah. No,
So
there's
in
some
cases
stuff where
like
you
that,
just have to go for it.
Yeah. I mean, in cases like that, though, you know, I mean, try to whatever works for you to make it as manageable of chunks as possible to get the whole thing down. You know, it's really up to you. But you know, again, lean on your brothers because they're going to help you if you start to stumble.
Yeah, there will always be guys that know what they're doing. You know, one would hope that there will always be guys that know what they're doing.
Right. With that being said, though, there's some guys who are too quick to prompt that they'll jump in if you take a breath, and it's like, no, I know it.
Yeah, this drives me crazy, especially because I shoot for a more natural speaking pattern in my lectures and with my conferral parts, right?
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that forces me to use a more oratory style in everything is because you do have those brothers that will jump in. Oh, he took a breath. He must be. He must not remember, right? And I'm going,
oh my God, he's lost.
I got this, you know. And I think as the more I travel and the more people get familiar with me and the way that I work, I think there's people realize like, oh, this is just the way that he works. He takes natural pauses and he has, you know, inflections that he uses. Then they give me an opportunity. But at every new place, it's kind of ground zero, you know?
Yeah. No, when you're doing a lecture and I'm there, it's you get that there's a distinct look you give, you know, that it's like, okay, he needs a word. And like the other day when I was going through the master's obligation and I was finishing up one part but didn't know the next one, and I kind of put my hands up and was like, where am I? And you gave me the word. Okay. Yeah. I'm good.
It's one of you got to know your brothers. The nonverbal communication it's way more important to recognize a brother's cues or have agreed upon cues than to just stop and go next. You know, like you can't do that. That's not cool.
Yeah,
but you can give somebody a very panicked look, and they'll know what you mean.
It's happened, right? Oh my God! Oh crap! Oh crap! Where were we?
This is not what I intended.
My bad.
So gentlemen, it's we've had a great conversation. I feel like it is time for the Fraternal Quote of the Week. And today's Fraternal Quote of the Week is very short. My brain is the key that sets my mind free. And that is by Brother Erich Weiss, a.k.a. Harry Houdini, the famed escape artist. Also a Brother Mason.
Nice.
What are y'all's closing thoughts?
So for me, man, challenge yourself. Just get after it. I promise you will surprise yourself. You know, all throughout the history of humanity, you know, when either necessities required it or man just naturally pushed themselves, they've went far beyond the bounds of what they thought they were capable of. I'm living, breathing proof of that, you know, because I would have never thought I would have had the confidence I've had. And there's other aspects of life that's added to it. But Freemasonry and learning that work and memorizing it has added so much, you know, value to my life and confidence in my everyday that I can't implore enough to just tackle that monster. Start eating that elephant because you can do it.
Grant, how about you?
I would say for the guys who are learning their memory work, you know, keep in mind with the rare, freakish exception that you run into, most of your guys in your lodge have struggled, especially on the intern apprentice degree. So don't feel bad if you're struggling. Just make sure that you are verbal and make guys keep up with you, right? If you're working with one guy and he's not available on a day that you're available, find a second guy to work with. Don't let it become, don't don't let yourself make excuses, and you're going to be okay on it. And if you feel like you can't learn in this manner, you can. You're just training your brain to do something new. So be ready for that.
Billy, how about you?
So one thing I have to say is memory work, when you start working on it, it does seem daunting and it seems impossible. But as you work into it, it actually has impacts outside of Masonry too. I am terrible with names. Absolutely horrible. Yeah, I sound like the Canadians from South Park. Whenever I meet people, I'm like, "Hey, guy, how you doing, friend? Hey, what's up, buddy?" But
hey, guy.
That's why we have the word brother or companion.
I use bro a lot too. How are you, bro?
But I found that actually working, especially in this past year, right? I have been intensely cramming a whole bunch of different parts, a whole bunch of different memory work. And it's had a payoff in that now I'm way more likely to remember someone's name, even if I've only met them a couple of times. And it's cool because, I mean, especially because I'm a manager in a huge company, and those little personal contacts mean a lot. So memory work does pay off outside of Lodge.
That's such a great point, because you don't know the benefits of what, you know what I mean? Until you get to that healthy brain point, you don't know what the benefits are of what it is to have a healthy brain, because you haven't experienced it.
I have, right. And I've got to say, I've benefited immensely from learning ritual and picking up memory work, because I was never, in college, I was never good at memorization stuff. Multiple choice answers or remembering formulas or anything like that. I just couldn't do it. Like, you give me a formula sheet or whatever, and I will be able to find the answer that you need, right? That's good. I'm good with processes. I'm not good with just memorization. I'm good at understanding things, but not memorization. And then I became a Mason, and suddenly something went click inside my head, and the key turned, and my mind was unlocked, and it's been incredibly beneficial. That being said, I love the show The West Wing, and one of my favorite gags is when President Bartlett is walking through the White House with his staff, and he says hello to everybody by name, and then at the end of it, he goes, "I didn't get any of their names right, did I?" And Josh, his employee, says, "No, no, you didn't." But folks, we are Fort Worth Lodge 148. You can find more info about us at www.fortworth148.org. We are at Fort Worth Lodge 148 on Facebook. Our email is info148@fortworth148.org. If you live in the 64th District of the Grand Lodge of Texas and you want to promote an event, reach out to them at 64th.org. That's 64th.org. You can learn more about Texas Masonicon, our upcoming event in September, at www.texasmasonicon.com. That's masonicon.com. We are at Texas Masonicon on Facebook and Twitter, and Instagram as well. You can pre-order tickets for the event, which is in September. The pre-order tickets are $45, and if you want to make sure that you get them before, I think August 15th is what we said, that is when the pre-orders will close, and that is when it will go to regular ordering, just so that it makes our life easier to organize the event. It's going to be great. We've got a bunch of speakers lined up. You want to go to this, and it's here in the temple at Fort Worth.
Yes, it's going to be fun. I was wondering, should you, instead of saying Masonicon, should it be Masonic on?
Oh, maybe I'll have to switch that for future episodes. I like that idea.
Masonic on. That's greatness. Man, I really enjoyed this. I kind of wondered where we would go with this podcast, but I really enjoyed it, guys.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was a lot of fun.
This is something I'd like to revisit. This is something I'd like to revisit in more detail at a later date, too, because I think we can, we had a lot of good discussion on this, and I think there's still a lot of good discussion to be had.
Yep, for sure.
Yep.
Yes, sir.
All right, gentlemen, this is Rhit Moore signing off.
Grant Gates signing off.
This is Billy Hamilton signing off.
And this is Gabriel Jagush signing off.